Welcome to the Profit Answer Man, Wes Barefoot. It's great to have you join us today.
Hey, Rocky. Good to be here.
Can you share a little bit about your business?
Yeah. I'm happy to. We have a couple businesses. My kind of core focus is Path to Freedom, which is a consulting firm. I basically work with aspiring business owners and help them, first of all, define their goals and what they really want to get out of business ownership. And then my expertise is franchise ownership. So I have relationships with several hundred of the top franchise companies across the country. And we work through a process that helps them identify the right type of franchise business for them and get a manageable number of options on the table to start really digging into. And I coach and guide them through that entire process. But I got into all of that because I kind of fell backwards into this whole world of franchising when I was just a few years out of college, and pretty quickly into that experience working for franchise companies. I got the bug and then kind of transferred that to my wife, and we bought our first franchise business almost 7 years ago, which we still own, which is a company called Shelf Genie. We do high-end custom pull-out shelving and custom closet systems. We've also owned and sold another franchise business in the home service space, which was a full-service insulation business. So, it's really all that experience working for franchise companies, owning franchise businesses ourselves that led me to kind of helping other people explore this pathway of franchising and see if it could be a good fit for them.
Out of curiosity, why the franchise instead of building your own home service business in a new vertical?
Yeah, well, part of it was that, I got introduced to this world of franchising very young, like I said, just a few years out of college. So, had it not been for that, who knows, right? I don't know if I would have even, I don't think I would have had any drive or desire to go start a home service business of any type. Because I don't have a background in home service. Like, I'm not a very handy person. No one should pay me to do projects for them, right? So, the franchise, I think I was fortunate in a lot of ways that I just kind of got this education very early on that, in a franchise, when it's done right, there's a system, there's a blueprint that if you plug into it and you follow that system and you put the work and the effort in, then there's a lot more there's a much higher chance of success. And what we've learned, my wife and I, over the years of owning our own businesses, I mean, at this point, look, I have all the confidence in the world that we could go and start our own business from scratch and be successful. But I think where a franchise really helped us was it just gave us the ability to run faster. Within 3.5 years of starting our first franchise, we had two franchises, both of which were doing over 7 figures in revenue. And so it really just kind of catapulted us into this realm of being self-sufficient, no longer having to rely on employers, good income, more income than we had when we were working, W-2 jobs. I think we could have done it on our own. I think it would have taken a lot longer.
And that makes sense. Having the information helps you to go faster. Having a proven path also is great. So you
Yep.
have these two businesses, and as we've chatted before, you said they look the same on paper,
Mhm.
and yet they were massively different. Can you
Yeah.
explain what you saw and what that difference was?
Yeah. So with those two businesses was Shelf Genie, which is the franchise that we still own. And the other one was Koala Insulation, which we sold about a year ago, but we owned it for almost 4 years. So we don't currently own that business any longer. But yeah, I mean, on paper, if you're just kind of looking at these as two business opportunities, they're both in this kind of home service, home improvement category, right? Neither of them are brick and mortar storefront type business models, right? You are developing a territory or developing a market. You're taking your products and services to your customers. They both can be started as relatively low overhead businesses. In other words, you don't need a huge amount of infrastructure. You don't need a huge number of employees in order to begin operating the business. You scale all of that up as you go, and as the business is growing. What we learned, and some of this wasn't a complete surprise, right? But a lot of what we learned over the course of building out the insulation business, which was the second franchise that we got into, was that there were some things with our Shelf Genie franchise that we were kind of just taking for granted that were actually really, really attractive features of just that type of a business model. All right. And so one way that they're really different is that insulation is a commodity. right? It's a needed service or a needed product, right? Every home, every building needs it. And then existing homes and existing buildings need it to be replaced from time to time or need it to be upgraded from time to time. And that's something a lot of people look for, right? When they're evaluating different business opportunities, they want something that's more of a needs driven business versus our Shelf Genie business, which is a high end home improvement. It's custom pull out shelving, which is pretty niche. It's not inexpensive. And there's a lot of people out there that just wouldn't have the means or the desire to pay that type of money for this type of a home improvement. So very much not a needs-based business, but a nice to have or something that people want. But understanding that leads you to really understanding some key differences in the business and also how the business is going to scale long term, right? So with something like Shelf Genie, where again, you have this high-end custom product that's not needs based, we don't hold any inventory. Everything is built exactly to order, literally down to the millimeter for each customer that we have, right? So our process is, we run targeted sales and marketing. We get warm leads. We qualify those leads. We have a salesperson, or what we call a designer, go out and run an in-home consultation, right? To someone that has proactively reached out to us and said, yes, please come out and talk to me about your products, right? So we have a very high conversion rate once we get one of our designers in the home, right? And then we design everything custom for them. But before we order any product, before we are on the hook for any material cost, we have a signed contract and a 50% deposit from that customer, right? Our cost of goods run on average about 26% of revenue. So that deposit's more than covering our cost of goods. It's covering our commission that we pay to the salesperson and then some, right? Then we order the product, we receive the product, we go and install it. Typical job's going to be a 4 to 5 hour install for one person, and we're taking final payment the day the job is completed. Okay. Then our manufacturing partner invoices us 30 days after the product ships to us. All right. So the vast majority of the time, we're paid in full on the job before we have to turn around and pay for materials. All right, why do I take a minute to walk you through all of that? Because it probably sounds pretty boring, but that's a really good cash flow business, right? We don't have accounts receivables, right? We don't have to make big lump sum investments in product or inventory and kind of cross our fingers and hope we, ordered the right amount or ordered enough or that we're going to be able to sell through it. We don't have to spend a bunch of time and energy chasing down accounts receivables, right? In the insulation business, it's a little bit different. Obviously, there are different types of insulation, but for the most part, insulation's insulation, right? And so it makes sense, especially as you start to scale a business like that, that you do start to order your product in some larger quantities because you can reduce your cost per square foot, which is how that's all looked at. So we had a big warehouse, right? And we were placing large orders, of product, which makes a lot of sense, right? If you know what you're doing. And we learned that, right? We, took some lumps on the head along the way in terms of ordering too much of certain types of products, not enough of others. But, we ironed all that out pretty quickly. But if you still just look at it from a cash flow perspective, you're laying out all this capital up front, you're holding this inventory. And then, part of what attracted us to that insulation business was the big new construction component of it, right? A lot of our business was coming from home builders and contractors. And like I said, that was an attraction point to us, right? We didn't have much of that in our Shelf Genie business, right? We spend a lot of money on marketing and advertising in our Shelf Genie business. In something like the insulation business, you get in with the home builders, you get in with the contractors, you do good work for them, they're going to keep sending you business that doesn't cost you anything, right? So we didn't have the type of marketing and advertising budget. We looked at all of that as, big pros to that business, and all of that checked out. What we didn't really factor in as much, what we kind of learned the hard way, is that these builders want payment terms, right? Net 30 is what they ask for. In reality, net 60, a lot of times you're flirting with net 90 before you're actually getting paid, and you're floating all of these costs, the material, the labor. There's a lot of back and forth, right? If you send guys back out because a job didn't pass inspection the first time, or what we really learned the hard way was how in these types of industries, a lot of times other subcontractors would come in behind us and they would accidentally knock down some of our insulation. Well, guess what? The builder's calling and just telling me or my manager, hey, your guys didn't insulate this area. All right. So now we're sending guys back out. The point of all of it is that is not a good cash flow model, especially if too much of your business is coming from these types of customers that expect these drawn out payment terms. So everything I said about Shelf Genie, not buying and holding inventory, not chasing down accounts receivables, we had a lot of that in this insulation business, right? So on paper, right, if we were just looking at our profit and loss statement on an accrual basis, we had a very nice, profitable business. But from a cash in, cash out standpoint, it was very, very difficult for us to get to a point where we had the cash reserves on hand to really feel comfortable to start, paying ourselves as owners. We had a full-time salaried general manager, salespeople, team of W-2, installers or technicians. And we were just constantly chasing down accounts receivables. And I think I hope that's a good illustration for people out there that are, maybe considering what type of business to get into. I see this a lot as I'm coaching people through this process. A lot of these businesses on paper or at first glance are going to look like they would be very similar to each other, but they're really not. I've got other examples of how, those two businesses are different too that we could go into, but the cash flow was a big one. And that was, like I said, we realized that we took a lot of things for granted with our Shelf Genie business.
And I think this is important because everyone wants to scale and grow. And what I talk about is before you scale and grow, you've got to make sure that you have the cash for growth.
Mhm.
But more importantly, if you can build a business model that doesn't require cash to grow, is even better. So if you look at your two businesses, one of them can grow exponentially without you ever having to spend a dollar.
Yep.
The other one, in order to grow, you have to spend money, which that means that in those types of businesses, you have to stair step. You grow a level, then you wait 6 months to build up your cash again. You wait, then you can stair step. And that's why I prefer the first model where you don't have to deal with that. The second thing is, and I don't know how much it was with your two businesses, I like business models that allow you to scale with flexibility because we don't know what the growth is. And if I
Yep.
got to hire people and pay them and the growth doesn't come, or you got to cut them, that's an issue. So having a model that's extremely flexible people wise that can flex with your orders is big. Now, I don't know how you did this, but when did you pay your salespeople
In which business?
in the shelving business?
So, and this will kind of go to your point in terms of flexibility, to scale, right? In that business, in Shelf Genie, all of our salespeople, all of our installers are 1099 commission only team members, right? So it's a strictly commission model. Salespeople get a percentage of everything they sell. Installers get a percentage of every job they install. They drive their own vehicles. We don't reimburse for gas, mileage, any of that. We pay a very, very healthy commission, right? So if they are good, they're coming out far better than they would if we were paying them hourly or, paying them a smaller commission after reimbursing for gas and mileage. So it works out really well. And so we've had that business almost 7 years. And the newest person on our team's been with us for a year and a half. We have most of the people on our team have been with us for 5+ years at this point. But anyways, the salespeople get paid. And this is actually something I'll give my wife a lot of credit for because in the franchise, the norm, right, the way that they trained a new franchisee is pay your designers, what we call our salespeople, pay them the full commission out of that initial deposit, right? My wife didn't like that. So they get half of their commission out of the initial deposit. It's a little more tracking, right, for us to keep track of, when is that job installed. Therefore, the second half of the commission is then owed to the designer. But what that does is that keeps them engaged in the process, right? That keeps them motivated to, be there from a customer satisfaction standpoint, to still be a, good liaison to the client. And, look, this is a business where the product is fantastic, right? When people see it, they get excited about it. They want to show it off to their friends. And so like our best designers have figured out how to leverage that, right? Where they'll show up on the day of the install, right? And they'll bring a little gift. And the ones that do that, they get referrals from that. But I don't know that they would do as much of that if they'd already gotten their full commission as soon as they sold the job. Then they're off to something else. So it keeps them really engaged in that process. But that model that I just described to you, compared to a model where you've got salaried people, hourly people, to your point, that's a far more flexible way to grow your business. It's a lot more elastic, right? If things do slow down for some reason, you can kind of, retract back in. You don't have all these fixed expenses. In that business, we do spend a lot in marketing and advertising. So that's where we invest our dollars to grow the business. But we can always pull back on that if we need to.
And I love what your wife did, because whatever you incentivize is what you get.
Yeah,
And what you incentivized was, until this thing's installed, you're not done with your job.
that's right.
And I think that's a key. Too often we pay people too early, and then they're like, yeah, I'm done. It's
Yep.
like, no. You were supposed to finish the job. No, I got paid. I'm done. And by making sure that they don't get that second half until the client pays, that is always good. And we try and do that, because the other thing you'll notice is salespeople, not so much in your business, but in general, if they get paid up front, they don't even care if the client's ever going to complete the transaction,
They don't.
or if they've got the ability to pay 3 months later, because they're gone and they got paid. And that really keeps them aligned, as you said,
Yep.
and it keeps them involved. So I think that's super, super important.
Yeah, and we took that and applied it to the insulation business, where our salespeople, and they were, this is a little bit different. It wasn't commission only in that business. They were, salary plus commission, but they got paid not only after the job was done, but after we got paid, right?
Mhm.
So then that kept them on these builders a little bit to pay us quicker, right? I joke, but it's all true. I've never heard the phrase checks in the mail so many times until we started doing work for home builders. And then I heard that phrase so often. Like, if I had $1 for every time I heard the phrase checks in the mail, we wouldn't have even needed to sell the business. We would have been fine just off of that.
Out of curiosity, what percentage in the shelving business are you spending on marketing?
Our goal is to keep it around 10%. And, we fluctuate probably anywhere from like 8 to 12%, some months, maybe 15%. Some of it's seasonal, right? Spring and fall are kind of our gangbuster times of the year. We're exhibiting at home shows. We're doing a lot more of, kind of the ground game type stuff, in addition to all the digital and print mail that we do. It's interesting though, because in that franchise, the franchisor would tell you, hey, look, your goal should be like a 20% marketing spend. That's a 5 ROI, right? For every dollar you're spending on marketing, you're generating 5 in revenue. And then, that leaves enough room for you to have a healthy profit margin. And so that's where a lot of the franchisees kind of live in that system. And, we've been able to get it lower because of developing really good referral partnerships, right? We've never taken our foot off the gas with our marketing. In fact, our marketing investment, goes up pretty much year over year as we continue to scale the business. But, we've put a lot of time and energy into developing good referral partnerships that essentially drive business that doesn't have that marketing cost associated with it. Therefore, that lowers that overall marketing spend as a percentage of revenue. And that flows straight to your bottom line. So we probably, I'm just guessing, run that business 7 to 8% more profitable than most of the franchisees in that system do. And, at 7 figures plus, nothing to sneeze at.
No, it's not. And, that's where I struggle with some of the franchises. They tell you what to do,
Yeah.
but when you struggle, they don't tell you how to fix it.
Yeah.
They just like, well, you're supposed to, because if you went in that system, you said, well, my sales are low, their first answer to you is going to be, well, you're not at 20%, spend 20%. And it's like,
Right.
well, wait a minute.
Which may just hurt the problem, right? Because if there's
Yeah.
something broken in your sales process, more appointments isn't going to help you. It's going to
Correct.
cost more. Look, I'll be the first to tell you, when it comes to, the franchise versus non-franchise thing, there's a lot of crap out there when it comes to franchising. There's a lot of franchises that I wouldn't invest in, that really nobody should invest in, because the value exchange just isn't there. And a lot of franchises do a pretty good job on the front end, right? When you're a new franchisee for the first year or two, they're giving you some good support. They're giving you a good, kind of system to work off of to learn the business. But then once you're fairly established, all of a sudden you're like better at the business than they are. So they can't really help you, kind of to your point. But there are a lot of really good franchises out there that are doing a good job of that kind of, ongoing support piece. And then look, this gets overlooked all the time, but we've seen it in our franchises that we've owned. The value of having a peer network of other franchisees that own the same business as you is invaluable, right? And that's where, look, we're kind of at that point with Shelf Genie. There's not a whole heck of a lot the franchisor can do to help us run that business better, other than help us on pricing, right? And that's another big advantage that a lot of franchises bring to the table, leveraging buying power of the collective system to help keep costs low, right? That can be a big difference in some of these businesses. But we're constantly learning and getting better and challenging ourselves because of the other franchisees, right? My wife's got 5 or 6 franchisees, all kind of top performers in the system. And, they're in a kind of like a mastermind type group. They meet twice a month. They're always kind of challenging each other, giving each other ideas, sharing best practices. And like, that's probably where her first phone call would be if we had an issue like with our close rate or something like that. So I'm with you. A lot of franchises don't do it well, but there are ones out there that do. And my rule of thumb, if you're looking at a franchise, just look at the numbers, right? You should be able to feel like you can run that business just as profitably or more profitably because you're a franchisee than you could if you were in that business on your own. And if you see that potential, then, probably worth continuing to investigate at least.
You have to look at the numbers, though.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing most people hate to do, to look at the numbers.
Yeah, that's true. I don't know. I like it. I think it's fun, but I had to learn that. I was telling my oldest daughter's in 2nd grade, and she's, for whatever reason, turning out to be kind of a math nerd, which I love. She was, for fun, last night in the kitchen, sitting at the counter with a whiteboard, just having me throw out random math equations for her to solve. And I was telling her, I was like, I hated math when I was young and I wasn't good at it. Like, I really had to work hard. And I still like, algebra, any of that, good luck. Not for me. But I told her, and I was kind of joking, but it's true. I'm like, once I started putting dollar signs in front of numbers, that's when it got interesting for me. And that's when I started paying attention and kind of wrapping my head around it.
I will say this, when it comes to math and business, we've never used the quadratic equation.
Thank God.
We've never really had to use much geometry.
No. Nope.
The only time I've actually used geometry is, all right, it's 20 feet to the roof line, and I got to be about 8 feet back with my ladder. How long's the ladder need to be?
Yeah.
But beyond that, most of this stuff is plus, minus, multiplication, and
A little
division.
bit of division.
Right.
Yeah.
So by the time she's in 3rd or 4th grade, she's got enough math skills to figure out the business and how it works.
Yep. Well, and we've got
that's the
AI
key.
now, right? So if you do, for whatever reason, need to apply the quadratic equation to your business, just throw it in the chat GPT and save yourself a bunch of time and headache, would be my 2 cents.
I agree with you. So what other differences did you see with the two businesses?
So we talked about the cash flow, right? We talked about the impact. I mean, like I said, on paper, that insulation business was profitable, right? We had higher margins, higher profit margins in the Shelf Genie business, but we also had time on our side, right? I mean, I think in a lot of these businesses, over time, you should be able to continue to improve the bottom line. It's not all going to come from one place, right? You're not going to all of a sudden find an extra 5% in profit because, you found a silver bullet for marketing or something, but you get a little bit more efficient here, you get a little bit more efficient there. You pick up a 0.5 point in profit margin, you pick up another 0.75 points over time. You can add 2, 3, 4 percent to your profit margin over the course of several years. So I think we could have continued to do some of that with the insulation business and had it, within like reason of Shelf Genie in terms of the net profit. We also had a lot more over. We were paying a full-time manager because, we didn't want to be in there running it day in, day out. But anyways, that's just on paper, right? In reality, the cash flow wasn't coming through. So we weren't really benefiting from any of that. We as owners had all this risk, right? Had all this investment into it, and the manager and the salespeople and, the employees were getting paid, right? But we weren't getting paid. You mentioned, scaling these businesses earlier, and we touched on that, but that's another big difference, right? I kind of outlined how Shelf Genie works, where everyone's 1099, they drive their own vehicles. So really our lever to grow is investing more marketing dollars, which does require cash, right? Or capital, but it should be an ROI calculation, right? It's not, an investment in the same way it is like, hey, we got to go invest in a warehouse or invest in more trucks and trailers. Something like that insulation business, you really kind of calculate what we call the unit economics, largely based on how much revenue a trailer or a crew can generate, right? So once you get to the point where you have 2 crews, there's only so many jobs 2 crews are going to be able to do over the course of a year, right? So how do you raise the ceiling? You go buy another F-50 and another $30,000 trailer with all the equipment on it, right? And so it's a fairly capital intensive business to keep growing. And with every truck and trailer comes more W-2 people, to run that crew. It's probably more invested in inventory. So it's not that it's impossible to scale. People scale businesses this way all the time, where they're reinvesting in capital to keep growing the business. But it's just something that you don't want that to come as a surprise to you when you get to a certain point in your business. You're like, crap, this is good, but now I got to put all this more money into it in order to take it to the next level. There are businesses out there where to your point, Rocky, you can keep growing it without having to really make those big capital investments, or at least much smaller, non-committal capital investments.
And that's what I prefer, building a business that is easy. I think we tend to build businesses that are difficult. But when you sit down and you run the model and you go, okay, how does this model out? It brings tremendous clarity to go, maybe this isn't the direction I want to go, or maybe this isn't the best way to do it.
What are some examples that come to your mind of these simple, I always think of them as like low overhead, quick to scale type businesses, but what are some examples that come to your mind?
So the big things up front are, how quickly do you get paid, and do you get paid before or after the work is done? Some business, like everyone wants to sell to Costco, right? Well, I'd love to put an order into Costco. People don't realize you've got to carry your cost for 120, 150, 180 days.
Yeah.
To do that. And imagine if Costco's half your revenue, that means half your costs are tied up, being a bank, and that's difficult.
Well, and they rotate things in and out so often, you may have too many of your eggs in that basket, and you're nothing to them, right? And if they decide, hey, this isn't selling the way we want, rotate it out, you may be left holding the bag on all of that.
Well, so that's like chargebacks and returns. Today I was reading an article of what's going on in retail. Because of Amazon and Zappos, people just buy stuff and return it left and right. And the cost of returns can crush your business. So having a product that doesn't tend to get returned, like you talked about when you mentioned builders, like in the back of my head, I already know you're getting paid 90 days and they're going to do their best to drive you to the bottom price-wise.
Yep.
And I'd rather work in an industry where you can charge premium prices and get it. I don't want to drive to the bottom.
Yep.
Where is the industry going? Like, what does tech or change cause to that specific industry? So, for example, I would bet 50 years from now, people are still going to live in houses. Those houses are still going to have roofs. They're still going to have plumbing. They're still going to have electric. Now, it might change, but they're still going to have that. On the other hand, if I'm a marketing agency, you mentioned ChatGPT, Whoa, that's a massive
Yeah.
change to that industry. If you just look at what the iPhone has done to industries, it's difficult. But at the same time, even if we go back to the home building industry, there's a whole different bunch of types of roofing. Some you're commodity priced,
Yep.
others you have the ability to be premium priced.
Yep.
So how do I go into a premium priced industry instead of a commodity priced? Because if you're commodity priced, you're stuck.
Yeah.
And then the other question is how many people can mess with your business? So at the end of the day, like you talked about, especially if you're doing in a house, if I'm the painter, no offense, everyone's going to mess with my stuff because the guy's putting in the bathroom, he's scratching it
Yeah. It's
here, this
unavoidable.
guy's doing it's unavoidable, which
Yep.
means you've got a headache business, right? I don't want a headache business. I want an
Such a good point.
easy business
Such a good point.
that is there. The other thing is, can it be offshore? Or, what does that do to you? Is there a remote to entry?
Hmm.
And what does that look like? And then how capital intensive it is. Because even in the construction industry, how big a truck do I have to buy? How expensive is my equipment? What is it going to cost me for those kinds of things?
Yep.
And then what's my business model? So even in the home building industry, I can build a model where everyone is subcontractors. Like you said, you don't have to pay their trucks, they're driving, the this, the that. They get paid a fee and you don't have to worry about their inefficiency.
That's right.
Whereas other models, you got all these people in an office. Do you know how to manage them? Who's efficient? Who's not efficient? That's all a headache to me.
Yeah.
And so it's looking at each and every part of the business and the market. And now let's go back to the other part of that. Even with your closet business, you are heavy marketing spend. So you don't always know if it's going to work. You know it. Yeah, you think but then it works until it doesn't. So you got to
Yeah.
constantly be
Yeah,
on
we're
that.
always tweaking and trying new things. And we've kind of learned that like some of our, like, believe it or not, in that business, good old fashioned direct mail, Valpak it's been one of our steadiest, most consistent marketing vehicles over the years. But we also know that if we run Valpak for 6 months, we probably need to pause it for 2 months and then go back to it because it will kind of start to get stale after a little while.
And it's interesting to me to hear you say that because a lot of my clients have not had a ton of success with that.
I think it totally depends on the business, the product, and the target demographic
And
of
I
the
agree
business.
with that. I don't know what they charge. I'm a big fan of direct mail, but
Mhm.
I'm a really big fan of targeted direct mail. In other words, hey, this development has
Yeah.
all the kind of homes that would buy this kind of closet. And we do targeted like, hey, we just put in this closet in your neighbor's home.
Yep.
Do you want one too? And then you send it to, now I'm only sending it to 200 people. And people don't realize I send that postcard to 200 people. It might only cost me $300.
Yeah, it's not
It's
that
not
expensive.
expensive. One, two, if they're thinking about it, the postcard's sticky.
Mhm.
Whereas if I do a Facebook post, oh yeah, I saw that closet. Where is it? I don't remember. How do I find it? You can't search Facebook.
Mm-mm. Yeah.
And so Facebook to me isn't sticky.
Yeah,
And
and Facebook is, and I mean, you could say the same about direct mail, but Facebook is, most people aren't going to Facebook to research. They're going to Facebook for entertainment. And so, you're kind of throwing your product in front of them, hoping you catch them mid scroll long enough for them to do something. But even if they like what they see and they're not in, research mode necessarily for like, in the case of what we're talking about, their next home improvement project. I like the targeted direct mail. We do some cool stuff with new movers programs where, we know we're mailing to people that have just bought a house and moved in. We work with some publications that just go to certain neighborhoods and communities that we know are the right kind of demographic. Valpak's a good example of where like a good franchise can really leverage the size of the system and the buying power. I would wager our cost on Valpak. We do it all based on zip codes. The zip codes that we mail to, we're probably getting it for half the price of what like another local company would be if they're going, because we go national, right, to Valpak through Shelf Genie Corporate, because you've got these franchisees all over the country doing Valpak. They're not required to, right? It's an option, but it's a good option, right? Because of the savings, because it is proven to be effective in our business. Whereas like, the independent closet company in our market, if they want to do Valpak, they got to go to the local person, and they're going to probably pay close to double what we pay. But
And
yeah,
there goes
direct
the
mail,
margin.
surprisingly enough, it works.
Yeah. No, and that's what these are just some of the things, but at the end of the day, if you take the time to think about your business and work on your business instead of in your business, you make the right decisions, life can be easier. Business
Yeah.
doesn't have to be hard.
And I think, really getting clear on your goals and what you want to get out of business, right? Like you're working primarily with people that already own a business, right? I would imagine you run into this sometimes, right? Where I'm just going to use random numbers here, but they're at 2 million a year in revenue, and they're like, Rocky, I got to get to 5 million to hit my goals. And, they think that's what the goal should be. But if they really sit down and unpack that, what they really need to do is just get more control of their time to make the same amount of money that they're already making. But in their mind, it's, hey, I got to make more to justify all the time that I'm putting into it. Right.
Yes.
I see this a lot of times, and you hit on something that I wanted to kind of point out, which is, I forget exactly how you phrased it, but you want to be in a business that's not incredibly stressful. Right.
Mhm.
Most of the people I'm working with are looking at making a transition into business ownership, usually coming out of corporate America in some form or fashion. Right. And so there's always a financial component to the motivation. Right. But a lot of the people I work with have done very well for themselves in corporate America. They're currently doing well for themselves in corporate America. And there's more often than not a lifestyle motivation that's just as strong, if not stronger, than the financial motivation. They don't want to come in and like go way backwards in terms of their income, but like they're really looking to take more control of their time and their schedule, right? And have a better work-life balance. And this is something that should absolutely be taken into consideration if you are considering what type of business to get into. So we've talked a lot about the 2 franchises we've owned today. Take a wild guess, which one of those 2 is a more lifestyle friendly business out of the 2?
I'm guessing the closet one.
100%. 100%. And there's a couple reasons for it. One's going to sound silly or like just so common sense, but our customers in Shelf Genie are excited to see us, right? They have decided that they want to invest in this product, right? And you kind of chuckled earlier when I told you, like, they're freaking proud of it, man. Like, I can't tell you how many times our installers, they're not even done with the job, and they've got 3 of their neighbors over showing it off. Check this out. Check out our new pantry. Check this out. And so like, that's a fun business to be in, right? Like, do we have issues sometimes? Do we have customers that aren't entirely satisfied? Do we drop the ball every now and then? Right. But zoom out, generally speaking, that's a fun business to be in. Our customers are excited to see us. They love to tell other people about us. It's a pretty easygoing business. There's no shelving emergencies, right? Insulation business, dude, you're dealing with builders, man. They want everything yesterday, right? They will cancel on you in a heartbeat because they didn't pass an inspection or something came up. They don't care if you have another job to slide in there or if you're losing an entire day, right? But it's urgent, 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 urgent until it's time for them to write you a check. Then it's not urgent anymore. But other than that, it's nonstop urgency. No one's excited about insulation, right? It's needed. We've established that, but no one's excited about it. You're paying money for this fluffy pink stuff because you have to have it, not because you're like going to be proud of it or excited that you have it. All that sounds like very common sense, but these are things to think about, because I can promise you when it comes to your day-to-day lifestyle, right, and the enjoyment that you're getting or not getting out of your business, these things make a huge, huge difference. And so I hear this all the time from people. They want a needs-based business. They want something that's recession-proof, right? That's going to be nonstop demand, and all of that's good. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but just understand that likely comes with the type of business that also has a lot of urgency with it. And it's the type of business where you kind of constantly have to be on your toes and ready to respond. And those are just not going to be as lifestyle friendly of businesses generally.
And I totally get it. If people would like to connect with you, learn about franchises and maybe how some of them differ and which ones might meet their needs and their lifestyle, how do they do that?
Yeah. Go to my website, which is path2freedom.com. It's just PATH, the number 2 FRDM.com. I also have a podcast. Rocky's been a guest on the podcast before. It's also called Path Number 2 Freedom. You can find it on YouTube. You can find it on Spotify, Apple, any of the podcast platforms. Talk a lot about franchising on the podcast, but not exclusively. But I have interviewed a lot of the founders and CEOs of the different franchise companies that I work with. LinkedIn, all the social media places. But best place would be go check us out on YouTube, or you can reach out to me directly through the website. But if I could, just real quick, Rocky, my services are completely free, right? The way my consulting model works, there's no charge, there's no obligation. It's like an executive recruiter. I get paid by the franchise companies if I, match them up with someone that ends up becoming a franchisee. So anyone that's curious about this type of stuff or just has some questions, like I love having these types of discussions. So happy to talk to anyone, even if it's just very, very exploratory. But Rocky, I appreciate you. I've gotten the chance to have a number of conversations with you now over the last couple of years and have thoroughly enjoyed it every single time, man. So thanks for having me on, and thanks for everything that you're doing.
Thank you for joining us. Thanks for listening to this unedited video of the Profit Answer Man podcast. If you'd like to catch the full episode and learn more about what we do, check us out at profitcomesfirst.com. We also go through the Profit First book in each and every chapter in the beginning episodes of the podcast, so check those out as well. Thanks for listening, and here's to you having a more profitable and growing business.